Now, it's a really important story next, actually, and it's to do with defibrillators. So if you've been following what's been happening at the West Bridgford Colts Football Club, you'll know that they've been campaigning for VAT not to be charged on the purchase of defibrillators. And it's for a really important reason for them, because 17-year-old Dylan Rich collapsed during a youth football game last September. Well, now Ruth Edwards, who's the Conservative MP for Rushcliffe, has raised the idea in Parliament. The government doesn't seem convinced, though, saying price reduction may not actually be passed on to consumers. And Ruth is with us now. Ruth, a very good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. So obviously the story of what happened with Dylan Rich is so worrying that you felt the need to back their campaign, did you, to take off VAT on defibrillators?
Yes, that's right. Well, I think the important thing is that we need to make defibrillators more affordable for sports clubs, for other community groups like the Colts. VAT is one option for doing that. There are lots of others. But the reason it's so important is that if you have a cardiac arrest, like Dylan did outside of hospital, and a defibrillator is used on you in the first 3 to 5 minutes of that cardiac arrest, your chances of survival are 70%. But after that 5 minutes, your chances of survival drops by about 10% for every minute until a defibrillator is used on you. And that's why it's so important that we get them into every sports pitch and every street corner possible.
Oh, my goodness, I hadn't quite realised that the statistics were quite that severe. But you almost feel like we need them everywhere.
They make a huge difference. Yes, they make a huge difference. And the Colts have been running a fantastic campaign on this. It's also hugely supported by organisations like Trent First Responders, by Nottinghamshire Fire Service. They're working together to train community groups on how to use defibrillators, because that's the other issue that's come up whilst I've been looking at the subject of defibrillators. Lots of people don't own them because of the price, but lots of people also don't feel confident in using them. And I didn't know how to use them myself. And I thought, I really should get trained on this, because what if a constituent collapses, at one of my surgeries or something? What would I do? So they provided training for me and my team at West Bridgford Fire Station, and will train any community groups who interface with the public. So I think it's a great thing that they're doing.
You say there's a price issue. How much do they cost?
Well, it depends a bit on the unit. So different types cost a different amount. But we'd say the average price was about £1,250, which is quite a lot if you're, raising money from, cake sales and raffles and individual donations. And especially at a time when people's finances are stretched with inflation and, the cost of living is increasing, I think it's really important that government looks at how we can support communities to own more defibrillators, because they really are life-saving machines.
Yeah. So the Colts calling for them to be VAT-free. The government, though, of course, they're not convinced. They say that actually this price reduction might not be passed on to consumers. So how do you kind of push this forward then? How do you try and get that reduction?
So, the government are never going to stand up at an adjournment debate and sort of announce a change in tax policy. But I think there are lots, and they do raise a valid point actually about having that VAT cut passed on to consumers. But there are lots of options we could look at, because there are some charities at the moment who are involved in first aid or medical care who actually are exempt from paying VAT on defibrillators. So we could look at widening that exemption. We could look at, a sort of pot of money, like a one-off grant that the minister mentioned in her response, which they've had previously, to look at boosting defibrillator use. But whatever we choose to do, we really need to make sure that we couple that with a publicity campaign around, what defibrillators are, how they're used, put people in touch with organisations that are willing to train members of the public on how to use them, because we've got to get people, confident in using defibrillators and noticing them when they're out and about.
Yeah, that's it. It's spotting them, isn't it? It's spotting them. And I always make a mental note now when I see them, especially around where I live. I think, one's there, because they're in those bright cases. Interesting stuff, Ruth. Thank you very much. Good to speak to you. Ruth Edwards there, a Conservative MP for Rushcliffe.